Hey, Cal Ewing here, and we're going to talk today about the 1% rule as it pertains to rental property investing. So you may have heard of this 1% rule. It used to be called the 2% rule maybe a decade ago. But either way, what it is it's a way of sifting through numerous properties that you might be considering as your next rental property investment. And it's an easy calculation you can do to pinpoint rental properties that might make sense for your portfolio and easily get rid of ones that don't. So how the 1% rule works is you take the property value and the rent, 1 month's worth of rent should be at least 1% of the purchase price. Okay, so an easy example of this is if the property is worth $200,000, it's pretty hard to find those kind of deals. But let's say the property is worth $200,000. The rent would have to be $2,000 a month in order for that property to pass the test, the 1% rule test. Okay, and if you're trying to buy a rental on the 2% rule, then you would need, in that case, you'd need rent to be $4,000 per month on a $200,000 property. Okay, so in most markets, getting the 2% rule to make sense is very difficult to do. Trying to find properties that you can buy that cheap or with rents that high. And so I see a lot of rental property investors out there right now, and even gurus and things like that, where they're talking about markets where you could still buy rental properties under the 1% rule. Now, 1% rule is great. It's a good way to, if you've got a lot of deals you're looking at, if you're going through the MLS and you're trying to figure out which properties you want to offer on that might be good rentals, it's a good thing to use. It's a good rule of thumb to sift through the junk. Okay. But relying on the 1% rule, I think, is a big danger especially if you're a new real estate investor. Okay, and here's why. So what the 1% rule means is that if rents are going to be 1% of the purchase price, you need to make sure that you get a mortgage. If you're going to be financing the property, you need to make sure that you're going to get a mortgage that's below that 1%. So that you're going to actually cash flow. That's what, if you look up what the 1% rule is, that's the second part, is you need to make sure that you get financing so that your payment is going to be less than that 1% rent amount, right? So in this case, if you got financing on your rental and you're buying it for $200, the rent is $2,000, you want to make sure your monthly mortgage payment is going to be less than $2,000 a month so you actually cash flow. And I think that's a big mistake because a lot of investors, they don't think about all of the other expenses that need to go into a rental property. Okay, so yeah, the mortgage expense is one of your biggest expenses if you are financing your rental, but you need to consider these other things. Okay, so when I analyze a rental property, I am considering the following. So number one, in no particular order, would be vacancy. So right now in 2023, a lot of demand for properties. There's a shortage in a lot of markets, but even still, even in a hot rental market, I always consider at least 1 month per year where the property is going to be vacant. You know when tenants are going to leave, and so you want to be able to factor in the loss in rent for that 1 month while you clean it out and rent it out to someone else. It takes a while to put someone else into the property. Okay, so I factor in, me personally, 8% per year in my loss. So 8% of the monthly rent per month, okay, or annual rent. All right, so always consider vacancy even in a hot market. Okay, the other one is repairs. Now, if you've ever owned your own home, you know that things break. And if you've ever had a rental property or been a tenant, you probably know that tenants don't typically treat properties as nicely as you would if it's your own property. Okay. If you've got pets or kids, you know that they cause damage. And so again, if you're renting a property out to a family, there's going to be damage to your rental property and you're going to have to factor in money to repair it. You don't want to have to come out of pocket for repairs. And that could be everything from plumbing, painting, fixing fences, new light bulbs, whatever it might be, furnace filters, and then of course bigger repairs, right? So I always factor in between 5 and 10% of the monthly rent as a repair expense. Okay. Now, on the same line as repairs is CapEx, or capital expenditures. Now, these are larger things that you're going to need to maintain throughout the life of that property in order to keep its value and keep the property functioning. So these could be anything from a new roof, a new furnace, AC, a water heater, foundation repairs, windows, all those big expense items that don't break, routinely, but you're eventually going to need to replace them. And you're going to have to factor that in, or else one day down the road you're going to have that bill because you're going to have to replace the roof. You won't have any money to replace it, right? So you need to be saving out of that rental income to make those repairs. Okay, so some people suggest 1 to 2% of the purchase price per year. That's how much you need to put away. Okay, so again, if you're buying it for $2,000, then you want to be putting $2,000 away per year to cover capex. Another thing that's handy to do is actually, once you buy the property and get your inspection report coming back, you're going to want to look at all of the items and see how much life is left in the big ticket items. So, for example, the roof. Look at the inspection report and see how many estimated years left on that roof before you'll need to replace it. And then you can figure exactly how long it's going to take to replace that roof and how much it's going to cost, or how many years you have to save up in order to buy a new roof. Okay, so let's just say the roof has 5 years left, and let's just say the roof is going to cost $5,000 to repair. Okay, well, if there's only 5 years left before you have to replace that roof, you probably need to be putting $1,000 a year away just for the roof repairs, right? So you can actually go by all of those expensive items and figure out the life remaining, and then budget exactly how much you're going to need to put away every year, so that when that expense comes, you're going to have the money in your account to pay for it. Okay, you won't be scrambling trying to figure out how you're going to put new windows in or whatever. Okay, so capex is a big one that a lot of people forget. Another one is property taxes, and this is really easy because you can just contact your local, whether it's city or county, figure out what the annual taxes are, and make sure you're factoring in that monthly and taking that out of your rental income, because you're going to have to pay taxes on your rental property, right? Usually tenants don't pay that. Insurance is the same way. I usually get quotes from whatever insurance company I like to work with. Make sure you get a quote before you close and factor that in before you pull the trigger, so you know how much you're going to be paying for homeowners insurance, right? We always want to make sure that we're insured in case there's a fire, flood, hail damage, wind damage, etc. Okay, and even liability insurance, because you are the owner of that property. If a tenant gets hurt or their family or friends hurt themselves on that property, it might be good to have liability insurance to protect you in case you get sued. Okay. Then property management fees. So a lot of new landlords, they may think that they want to manage their rental properties themselves to save money. But if you're buying rental properties with the goal of becoming financially free and having more time to travel and be away and enjoy life, then you don't want to be stuck managing your properties. So I think it's good to factor in property management, even if you're managing to begin with, because eventually you're going to probably want to hire that out to a property management company. So typically property management companies charge anywhere between 8 and 12% of the monthly rent each month. Okay, so factor that in even if you're going to be self-managing. Okay, and then of course your mortgage payments, your financing costs. All right, so when you're crunching your numbers before you buy a rental property, you need to be factoring in all of those expenses I just mentioned, and ideally there should be enough money at the end of all of those that you actually have some cash flow coming into your pocket, because that's the whole point, right? Most of us want to buy rental properties so that we have another stream of passive income coming in, and then if you can acquire enough of them, maybe you can be financially free and have enough passive income to quit your job, right? So if that is your goal, then you need to make sure it actually cash flows after all of these expenses are considered, and you put all of the repair costs and everything aside. Okay, and a lot of landlords, especially new landlords, don't think of that. And I see a lot of realtors out there that are marketing rental properties saying, great cash flow, 1% rule, etc. But when you really add in all those expenses, it might not be a good rental deal after all. Okay, and that entire market where you're investing in might not make sense really when you factor in all these costs to actually own rentals in. Okay, so it may be better to look at other markets where the rental rents are high enough, property values are low enough, so that you can actually factor in all these costs and still cash flow at the end of the month. Okay, now some people are fine with breaking even because their whole goal is to own properties long enough so that the appreciation later on, 30 years down the road, plus paying down the mortgage, that's when they're going to finally cash in on these assets. And that's a great strategy, expecting appreciation over the long term. It's a wealth building strategy, but I don't think it's very smart if you're losing money every month in the meantime while you're waiting for properties to appreciate. That property is sucking money out of your bank account month after month because of repairs and vacancies. That's not the kind of investment I want to have. I don't want it to be costing me money every month. I want it to be earning me money every month. So appreciation over the long term should be icing on the cake, but the rental itself should be cash flowing every month for you and becoming another stream of income.